You know the feeling. You spend hours, like maybe even days, planning the absolute perfect communicative speaking activity.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. You've cut up all the slips of paper, you have the materials totally prepped, the group's perfectly balanced, you set the students loose, and then...
Let me guess. Within 30 seconds, the entire room is buzzing.
Exactly. But it is buzzing entirely in their native language. It is, honestly, one of the most uniquely frustrating moments for any language teacher. You're just standing there wondering, oh, why did I even bother prepping all of this?
You feel like the whole lesson plan has just derailed before it even left the station.
Exactly.
But, if you look closely at the research, that buzzing room you're describing, it isn't actually a sign of failure. In fact, it might be the exact opposite.
It definitely feels like a failure, though, especially when you're trying so hard to enforce an English-only classroom and they just, well, ignore it.
I get that, but that's exactly why we need to rethink this.
Which is why we are here today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today's mission is custom-tailored for you, the language educator. We are unpacking a stack of sources today.
Yeah, some really fascinating stuff.
We've got research on code switching from the Korean Journal of English Language and Linguistics, some really great insights from the Cambridge Papers in ELT, and a highly practical British Council training video.
It's a great mix of theory and classroom reality.
Right. So we are going to look at the brain mechanics, the emotional triggers, and the environmental factors to discover why your students actually switch to their first language and how you can actually leverage it.
Because we are shifting the perspective entirely today. The goal here isn't to figure out how to just, police and banish the L1 from your classroom.
Right. No more L1 swear jars.
Exactly. We need to move away from viewing L1 use as this massive breakdown in learning and start seeing it as a strategic, highly effective cognitive tool. A tool your learners are using to navigate complex tasks.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start by looking at what is happening inside a student's brain before they even open their mouths. Because a lot of the time, an L1 switch isn't some conscious, rebellious choice they're making to undermine your authority.
No, not at all.
It's actually a physiological necessity. Like, the task is simply too difficult linguistically.
Right. When learners face a sudden lexical gap, so like a word they just don't know, or maybe a highly complex piece of grammar, their working memory essentially just maxes out.
It's cognitive overload.
Exactly, cognitive overload. Their brains simply do not have the processing power available to manage the complex intellectual requirements of the task and the linguistic requirements of English at the exact same time.
I actually noticed a perfect example of this in the research from the Korean University context.
Oh, the movie character study.
Yes, that one. So, a pair of Korean students are trying to describe a character from a movie to each other. They're doing great until they hit a wall trying to translate the concept of a washed-up rock star.
Which is a really nuanced concept.
Right. The English words just aren't there for them. Yeah. So they switch to Korean, they negotiate the meaning together, find the exact English words they need, and then seamlessly return to the English task.
And researchers actually call that a language-related episode, or an LRE.
An LRE.
Yeah. By switching to their native language, they cleared that cognitive bottleneck. They solved the problem efficiently instead of letting the entire conversation just collapse.
Which is what would happen if they couldn't use Korean.
Exactly. If you try to force them to just guess a word, they simply don't have the mental framework for the schema to understand yet. You are just wasting time. They don't have the foundational building blocks in their English vocabulary to arrive at washed-up rock star through context clues alone.
It's kind of like trying to assemble IKEA furniture, right? But using a manual written in a language you only half know.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You can probably figure out the easy parts by looking at the pictures, building the frame, putting in the shelves. But when you get to that one crucial, highly complicated step with the internal door hinges.
The worst part of any IKEA build.
Right. You are absolutely going to ask your friend to translate that specific instruction for you. Because you don't want to build the whole cabinet backward.
Exactly.
So as a teacher, you need to step in and act as that translator for the most complex pieces. You have to lower the cognitive load so they can actually finish building the cabinet.
And practically speaking, you do that by providing the translation once, explicitly. Use the L1 strictly as a cognitive bridge.
A cognitive bridge. I like that.
Yeah, give them the bridge, save their mental energy for the actual communicative task, and keep the momentum going.
Okay, I hear the research, but I mean, come on. When I see two teens whispering in their shared language at the back of the class, It really doesn't look like a high-level cognitive strategy.
No, it looks like they are gossiping.
Exactly, which brings up this massive teacher myth you hear in staff rooms literally everywhere.
Mhm.
Students use L1 because they're lazy.
It's such an easy assumption to make. But the
Yes.
data vigorously pushes back against it. It is actually the exact opposite of laziness.
Really?
Yeah.
The opposite.
Yeah. Think about it. When a student switches codes to ask a peer for a word, it demonstrates that both language codes are actively firing in their neural pathways. They are actively problem solving.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Right. They are doing the hard work to prevent a total breakdown in communication. Actual laziness would be just sitting there in silence, completely disengaging and waiting for the bell to ring.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
They're trying to stay in the game. But what about when we are just setting up the game? Sometimes we give instructions, and the second we finish speaking, the students immediately turn to each other and start speaking in their native language.
Oh, the instruction huddle.
Yeah. It feels so dismissive. Like, did you even listen to me?
But see, they aren't trying to ignore you. They switch because they literally don't know what they're supposed to be doing.
Because our instructions are too confusing.
Exactly. Think about how we give instructions as teachers. We often use these long, heavily polite, multi-step sentences.
Oh, guilty.
We say things like, okay, everyone, if you could please open your books to page 42, and then I'd like you to work with the person sitting next to you to answer questions 3 through 5.
And lower level learners just get totally lost by the word please.
Right. You might as well be the teacher from Charlie Brown. Wah, wah, wah.
I have seen that exact blank stare in my classroom.
Yeah.
So what's the fix? How do we give instructions without them needing that immediate L1 translation huddle?
The most effective technique from the British Council video is called sandwiching.
Sandwiching. How does that work?
You give the instruction clearly and concisely in English using imperative verbs. Then, you immediately provide the L1 translation yourself, and finally, you repeat the exact same English instruction.
So it's like English, L1 English.
Exactly. So it sounds like work in pairs, then the L1 translation, followed again by work in pairs.
That feels like it could become a crutch, though. I mean, won't they just wait for the L1 translation every single time?
Not if you manage it actively. The goal is to build a classroom routine. Over time, as they learn what work in pairs sounds like in the context of your classroom, you start fading out that L1 slice of the sandwich.
Until you're only using English.
Right. You are just using their native language to train their ear to the English instructions.
Okay, so we've talked about the brain and how cognitive overload forces an L1 switch. Let's pivot to the heart. What is happening with their emotions? Because I imagine anxiety is a huge factor here.
It is arguably the biggest factor, especially for adult and young adult learners. This brings us to Stephen Krashen's concept of the affective filter.
The affective filter. I remember that from grad school.
Yeah, you can think of it as an invisible barrier that goes up in a learner's mind when they are stressed, anxious, or afraid of making a mistake.
Invisible barrier. Sounds a little abstract, though. Let's make it concrete. To me, it sounds like a computer's CPU reallocating its resources.
Oh, how so?
Well, when a student's anxiety spikes, say, they're terrified of looking foolish in front of their crush who sits in the front row, the brain reroutes all of its processing power to threat detection.
Right, the fight or flight response.
Exactly. And that leaves zero RAM available for retrieving vocabulary or conjugating irregular verbs.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. When that affective filter is high, the system is completely overwhelmed by malware, basically.
Input cannot get in and output cannot get out.
Exactly. They just freeze. They might have the perfect answer in their head, but the fear of a grammatical mistake keeps them completely silent.
So how do we lower that threat level? Like, how do we free up the RAM?
A highly practical method is to separate the cognitive stress of what to say from the linguistic stress of how to say it.
Okay, split the tasks.
Right. Allow students to brainstorm and peer check their ideas in their L1 first. Let them use their native language to gather their thoughts, verify them with a partner, and just make sure their arguments make sense.
Oh, I see. So once they feel secure that their ideas are actually smart and valid, their affective filter drops.
Precisely. They gain the immense confidence needed to focus entirely on producing the final output in English.
I love that. You isolate the variables first, make sure the idea is good, then worry about the English.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's not just about fear, right? It's also about friendship. Language is deeply tied to identity.
Oh, absolutely.
When students share a native language, they naturally use it to build rapport. to make jokes or to express sudden, genuine emotions.
You see this play out beautifully in the Turkish university study from our sources. Students working in small groups would constantly use intimate cultural terms to address each other.
Like what kind of terms?
Words like abi, meaning older brother, or hokam, meaning my teacher. Or they would briefly switch to Turkish just to vent frustration about a really difficult grammar point.
And the researchers didn't see that as task avoidance.
No, not at all. That is building solidarity. They're establishing the social cohesion necessary to actually tackle the difficult L2 task together.
Okay, but let me push back a bit. If I walk by a group and they are laughing and throwing around cultural slang in Turkish or Spanish or whatever, how do I know they're building solidarity for the task and not just talking about their weekend plans?
It's a fair question.
How do you manage that without becoming a total dictator?
It requires explicitly acknowledging that social bond, but setting very clear boundaries between what researchers call on-record and off-record talk.
On record versus off record.
Yeah. You make it clear to the students from day one, on-record talk. So the actual task, the presentation, the final written product must absolutely be in English.
Right.
Well, off-record talk, the quick procedural chats, deciding who holds the pen, maybe a quick joke to relieve tension that can temporarily happen in the L1.
That distinction changes the whole dynamic. It gives them permission to be human while still holding them accountable for the language practice. It also connects to how they use their native language to check their understanding. We touched on this with those language-related episodes earlier, like when a student leans over and asks, does this word mean X or Y, before writing it down in English.
Encouraging limited, strategic L1 use for peer-to-peer clarification is vital. It keeps the communicative flow going.
Right, because if you ban that quick check,
The student hits a wall, they lose their train of thought entirely, and they just stop talking.
which brings us to teacher myth number 2. I hear this one constantly. If students are using their L1, they are not learning English.
And the linguistic research completely debunks this. For decades, we operated on this idea that the two languages lived in separate, sealed boxes in the brain.
And one had to be shut tightly for the other to open.
Right, but that's simply false. Languages are inseparably connected in the mind of a bilingual speaker. The process of translanguaging, using the L1 to resolve a lexical gap or clarify a complex grammar point, is actually a deeply vital part of the acquisition process.
Let me make sure I understand translanguaging. So instead of two separate filing cabinets in the brain, it's more like they have one giant linguistic database.
Exactly.
And they are cross-referencing all their available data to make meaning out of a new concept.
Precisely. They are pulling from their entire linguistic repertoire. When they translate a concept back and forth, they are actually building stronger, more robust neural pathways to the new English vocabulary.
So it's actively helping them learn.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the internal mechanisms, right? The brain and the heart. Let's look at the external environment. Because the actual tasks and rules we put in place might accidentally be encouraging the very L1 use we're trying to avoid.
This is a huge point.
It brings us to the harsh truth of task design. The activities we plan often give them no real reason to communicate in English.
Yes. If the ultimate goal of your activity is just to produce a written outcome, like filling out a worksheet or writing a dialogue to hand in at the end of class, students will naturally take the path of least resistance to get the job done.
Oh, totally. If you ask a group to write a dialogue on a piece of paper, they're going to spend 90% of the time discussing what to write in their shared L1.
And they'll only use English for the final transcription.
Exactly. It's like asking a team of engineers to build a bridge, but telling them you're only going to grade them on the blueprint.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Right. They'll use whatever tools are fastest to draw the blueprint. The actual physical building part becomes secondary or even totally irrelevant.
So the solution here is to design tasks that require spontaneous, real-time English negotiation to solve a problem. The focus has to be on the process of communicating, rather than just delivering a polished final product.
How do we do that practically?
You do this through information gap activities.
Right, where one student has information, the other desperately needs to complete a puzzle.
Exactly. If student A has the map and student B has the directions, they can't just silently write a dialogue together.
Because they don't have all the pieces.
Exactly. They have to actually speak to each other to figure out where they're going. The task mechanism itself forces the real-time negotiation.
That makes total sense. But even with great tasks, the classroom rules themselves can backfire, right? Like prescriptive, zero-tolerance, English-only policies.
Oh, absolutely. Those policies actively strip students of their compensatory tools. When you force learners to use only English without allowing them the support of their native language, the weaker students simply opt out.
This leads right into our final teacher myth, number 3. The stricter I am about English only, the more English my students will speak.
Yeah, and the research proves the exact opposite. Strictness breeds silence.
Wow, strictness breeds
It
silence.
really does. When you authorize strategic, limited L1 use, you actually increase the overall volume and the complexity of the English produced.
Because you lower the effective filter.
Exactly. You lower the effective filter and provide a cognitive bridge. Students feel safe enough to attempt much longer, more complex sentences in English. They know that if they get stuck halfway through a difficult sentence, they are allowed to use a quick L1 lifeline to finish their thought.
I've actually seen the alternative dynamic play out. A teacher enforces a really strict English-only rule, with a jar where you have to put in a quarter if you speak Spanish.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Suddenly, the classroom becomes incredibly quiet. The only people who ever participate are the top 2 students who already have the vocabulary. Everyone else just hides to avoid the acute embarrassment of not being able to express themselves.
It's heartbreaking. To fix this, you have to shift your mindset and your syllabus from an English-only policy to an English-mainly policy.
English mainly. That gives a little breathing room.
Right. You want to create a safe speaking environment where taking linguistic risks is rewarded and where using a tiny bit of L1 to clarify a point is seen as a smart learning strategy, not a punishable offense.
There is one final factor we haven't touched on yet. Sometimes students and teachers use the L1 simply to save time.
Especially when it comes to classroom management and behavioral issues.
Right. Both teachers and students use the L1 for economy. If a serious behavioral issue arises, say a student is playing with something genuinely dangerous in the classroom, trying to explain the safety rules in graded intermediate English takes far too long.
And furthermore, it completely lacks the emotional weight required for discipline.
Right. If you gently say, please stop running with those scissors, but they don't know the word scissors or the word running, they are just going to smile at you while continuing to be a total hazard.
The practical application here is to use the L1 strictly to manage severe discipline or maintain authority. A sharp, clear reprimand in their native language carries immediate emotional impact.
It stops the behavior instantly.
Yes, and frankly, it saves your precious instructional time for actual language practice instead of playing behavioral charades.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What should you do tomorrow in class? Here is your rapid recap of practical tips based on everything we've unpacked today.
Ready.
Number 1, keep your instructions short and use imperative forms.
Number 2, try sandwiching your complex instructions. English, then L1, then English, and just fade out the L1 over time.
Number 3, allow L1 for brainstorming and organizing ideas, but strictly require English for the final on-record output.
Number 4, use the L1 for strict classroom discipline because it carries the necessary emotional weight and saves time.
Number 5, never use the L1 to translate guessable words. Let them use context first so they develop autonomy, but absolutely provide the translation for highly complex concepts so you don't stall the whole lesson.
And number 6, embrace an English-mainly classroom rather than a zero-tolerance English-only one. Provide strategic support and you will see fluency increase.
That is a solid list. So we want to hear from you, the listeners. The classroom is a wild place, and sometimes the things they say in their native language are just hilarious.
Oh, always.
What is the funniest thing a student has said to you in their L1 today when they thought you didn't understand? Drop your story in the comments. And if you found this deep dive helpful, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and the channel for more highly practical classroom advice.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, though. The sources we reviewed repeatedly emphasize that English is increasingly a global lingua franca.
Right. It is used primarily between non-native speakers all over the world.
Exactly. Our students are statistically much more likely to speak English in a boardroom with someone from Brazil or Germany than they are with someone from London or New York.
That's a really great point.
So if the future of the English language belongs to plurilingual speakers who are constantly navigating multiple cultures and contexts, shouldn't our ultimate goal in the classroom be teaching students how to seamlessly and strategically translate and mediate between those worlds?
Wow.
Instead of pretending their first language doesn't exist, shouldn't we be teaching them how to leverage it as their greatest asset?
It really changes everything. The next time your classroom starts buzzing in that native language, during your perfectly planned activity, don't look at it as a failure.
No, definitely not.
look closely at what they are actually doing. They might just be building the bridge they need to finally cross over into English. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.